Welcome into the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, ABC 10's Sean Cunningham. Sean, what's going on?
Merry Christmas, James. You look at you back in the holiday spirit. I wish I had some lights or something around me to bring out my Christmas spirit. But yeah, 3 days off coming into the next Kings game on the 26th against Memphis. It's kind of a nice little reprieve and a nice little Christmas gift. This might be a nice way of the NBA saying, here you go, Sacramento, you deserve this.
Yeah, here you go, Sacramento. We're going to make you play all the games that you're not going to win because you don't have any players, but we'll give you 3 days off for Christmas because heaven forbid we don't want to put you on TV.
Right. We don't want that.
Nobody needs to see that. Sean, we're coming off a pair of losses, but we're kind of at that stage where it's not that we don't care about wins and losses, but this team's just limping through trying to get through this COVID outbreak. And it's been absolutely horrific on these guys. And we're still down 7 players. We're down, Alvin Gentry and Mike Longobardi. We were just, before we got on here, Sean and I were going through, there's a story on ESPN, which you have to pay for, I believe. And they tried to get Sean to sign up for they wanted his social security number. And
those scoundrels. I already subscribe, and they're like, hey, why don't you pay for the whole next year? And then there's no way to work around it. So I'm like, what if I just hit the back button? I did just log in, for crying out loud. And then there's the story. So if you get frustrated like I just did, hit the back button. You'll be fine.
Just hit the back button. I think it was an interesting story. Basically, It goes through and it tells some of the story of what happened behind the scenes with the Kings. And they're down both their equipment managers. They had to bring in new players and no one knew how to put names on the back of jersey. Sean with the brilliant idea, just bring it to the team store. Those guys will do it.
They do fine stitch work over there. They can make it work.
They will. And so I think it's just have it printed out on the big giant screen where you choose what jersey you want and all that. Just print one out. That's fine.
Just print one out.
It's just Adi Murky and Emmanuel Mudiay. We're going to get into that in a few once Sean silences his phone.
My bad. That's a fine. Time to run a lap.
Oh, wait. Bradley Beal enters the health and safety protocols.
And he just played where? Where was he going to play?
We didn't predict that, did we?
No.
Yeah. Sean, we did.
Well, and then you saw what's happening to the Warriors, and I was worried about that going down there with friends of mine who, were on my, it was on my birthday. I think we told the story and was down there taking it as a spectator. And, I had friends who had never seen Steph Curry play before, and I'm like, oh, they just played they're gonna play the Kings. I was like, well, they're coming back from Toronto. Okay, this hopefully bodes well. And then you had Wiggins go out, and then you had Jordan Poole go out. I think that was the order in which they went out for COVID protocols. And the whole time I'm thinking, man, can you imagine we're driving down there and Steph Curry's out? And unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I mean, gosh, now they just played the Kings.
Lee went out the next night. And so now we have to worry about the remaining 4 players that the Kings have that they may have been exposed during play while playing the Warriors. If they hadn't already been exposed by the litany of teammates that already had it. The same thing with Neemias. Neemias went out later than everybody else, but that also means that he was sitting there on the bench. He was working with his teammates, touching the same set of basketballs, so there's very high likelihood that we could see a second wave in Sacramento. So we could get one group back and then the other group goes and sits out for a week. So let's start there, Sean. Let's start there. Well, let's start with this. Number one, make sure you're subscribing to the Kings Beat. Make sure, if you can, jump on for a paid subscription. Paid subscriptions get an invite to the virtual happy hour, which is, what are we calling it? The Off the Record with the Kings Beat happy hour, episode 2, which will come at you on January 6th, which is Thursday from 5:30 to 7. It's a lot of craziness where maybe, I don't know, Sean, maybe we could tell the Jason Jones losing his.
Oh, gosh. I don't know if we should do that.
I don't know if we should do that. Yeah, we've been through some wars, trying to, keep the peace. That's all we're trying to do. Keep the peace.
We all have our moments, right? We all have our little
Oh
moments
yeah,
along
yeah.
the way.
James lost his shiz one night.
That's
Yeah.
a good one.
That is a good one. Maybe I'll tell that. I'll tell that on the Kings beat happy hour when I let a few people have it. Yeah, that's it. That's a good one, Sean. We need to pencil that down as something we'll talk about on the Kings beat happy hour.
I can't wait.
The night that James literally like almost had to like have like the blood pressure cuff put on him, and like, yeah, I blew my top. Yeah, I'm a redhead. I mean, that happens. I do run a little hot sometimes. Okay, so let's get back to it. Make sure to subscribe to the Kings Beat. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel. We get some really cool stuff upcoming. We're talking about like a Discord channel and some cool stuff that we're going to start doing with that. All kinds of exciting new stuff coming to the Kings Beat. So jump on. Sean, the Kings are scrambling here, and they're signing guys. Like, we're up to 3 players, but we don't know if we're done yet or not.
Right.
We also don't know when players are going to start coming back from COVID protocol. I think it's very possible, especially with the league changing rules, that we could see that tomorrow. We could see it the next day. Even though the Kings aren't playing, we might get word that they're going to be allowed back to practice, and then ramping up for Sunday. I think by Sunday, we're well over a week for almost every single player. We're into like 10 days for a lot of these players. I think we will see players back on the floor on Sunday. Just what are your thoughts? How do you think that we'll see players back?
Well, I wonder about that, because usually it was the whole 10-day quarantine, but it's still, as we were talking before we came on, a lot of all these players still have to test every single day. So if you go away to be away from the team, you're still showing up to, in your car, literally to get a swab, to
a drive-through car.
Yeah.
They
make sure
players roll down a window and they reach in, swab. If you're not watching,
you're welcome, YouTube.
You know, as a swab. That's in your nose. It's all over.
Yeah.
And then they like zip up the window real quick, like go.
Which I think is, I mean, I get it. Someone's got it, and you've brought back all these tests and your days into it. Like, sometimes I'd just be like, I would feel like, just leave them alone. Let them take a few days, whatever it is. I get it. You still want to test them every single day. This is a business. I get it. But yeah, you're testing every single day. So as we even heard, if it's going to be 10 days, if it's going to be 6 days, if you keep testing positive, then what? What happens then? I mean, I know, to share a story, I think I shared a story that I did earlier this year? Yeah, earlier this year, on Cody Garbrandt, the UFC fighter, former bantamweight champion. He got COVID in September, October-ish of 2020. He couldn't produce a negative test until the following February, James, and he had all sorts of problems. And he's what was known as the COVID long hauler, and he's one of the most conditioned athletes on the planet. So, fortunately, that hopefully doesn't look to be the case for the Sacramento Kings. I think we'll find that out. But to your question, James, about like, am I expecting players back? Sure. I think Alvin is the one you're going to expect back, because you're not going to see Alvin running up and down the court. All he has to do is basically return to the regular rigors of being an NBA head coach. And I think that's something that's positive, should he be able to produce that negative test. As for players, I don't know. I mean, I think there's some players you might see, but I also think, especially since we're hearing so many of their symptoms have been relatively mild, that they haven't really experienced a full bore of tough luck, or certainly no hospitalizations. So that's a good thing. So some of these guys are having it for the second time. De'Aaron Fox, Alex Len, Marvin Bagley. So in going through that, what does that look like? We heard Doug Christie just yesterday, and he was relating it to Rashawn Holmes, who made his return back. When you're 48 hours away from a game, like, you all of a sudden just fall out of basketball shape. I think he was being a little facetious, but it is true. Like, you're winded and you're running and all that thing, all the stuff that they do, it does kind of take a toll. Now, I don't know if it'll take a toll on a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who's a smaller guard, who's relatively quick and very small, and someone like Davion Mitchell. But some of the bigs, like an Alex Len, a Marvin Bagley, maybe, even Neemias at a certain point, maybe it'll have more of an effect on them. That's just pure speculation on my part. But I remember when De'Aaron came back from COVID last time. It's not like he was
weeks, dude.
He
for
was
him
out. He was out
negative tests. He couldn't get a negative test. Like the viral load was too high.
Right. So if
it took
that's
way longer.
And James, if that's what we're dealing with, then buckle up. I mean, I say that because we just heard that about 15 times in that Baxter Holmes piece, but on ESPN Plus. But yes, I mean, it's definitely a concern when you're going to get these guys back. And I do think you've got 3 guys that are signed to 10-day contracts right now, not just your G League, 2 ways or anything like that. Like we're literally talking guys off the street,
hardships.
Yeah, hardships, 10-day contracts. So 2 of them just signed a day or 2 ago. And that, as you mentioned, with Ade Murky and Emmanuel Mudiay. Justin Robinson, I think his 10-day will hit next Tuesday, I believe. I could be wrong. I might have my math wrong. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they're expecting, hey, here's the 10-day, here's your negative test. Okay, now go back out there. I think they might take their time with it, make sure that their conditioning is right, and kind of slow play it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Rashawn Holmes come back from injury, and again, the eye laceration. I think people who didn't listen to any of the press conference afterwards or didn't see any of the clips, he said he doesn't think he'll ever play again without goggles on, which I thought that was a pretty crazy statement. But I asked him afterwards, "Are you having any blurry vision or anything?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm having all kinds of stuff. Like I'm having pain. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not." But I wanted to get out here and play. And then he only played 17 minutes. And I think it's because he just Doug saw that he didn't really have it yet. And he needs a practice or 2. They might get a practice in here in the next couple of days, but they're not going to do media between now and Christmas, which Sean and I may have disagreed on a little bit behind the scenes, but not because Sean wanted to go to practice, but you needed some stuff, right?
It's the principle. If you're having a practice, there needs to be a media availability. That's just the way the rules are. And
I agree.
I'm sorry, I don't give a damn if it's Christmas or not. Like if you're practicing, there needs to be media availability. What if too many things can happen? You have to be on site. That's how we're covering the NBA works.
Yeah, my problem, the only problem I have with it, I mean, maybe they could have done a Zoom practice for us, but they are still in an outbreak, and whether or not these guys are healthy or not, we're talking about having a scrum where you're 6 to 8 feet away. And the last thing, my only disagreement with Sean in this situation was I just told him I would not show up on Christmas Eve because my concern was that I would potentially get COVID from them and then pass it to family members over the next 2 days, as we're celebrating the holidays. So in a normal situation, I would be there, but in a overwhelming COVID situation, I'm just a little leery because I mean we talked about.
I mean, we're all a little leery going into the building. What I would say is, you protect yourself, and again, they could put it. We're in a corner of the gym, far away from everybody, and if you want to get rid of the scrum, that's great. I've got a boom pole that all the people are supposed to have anyway, or just bring them into the interview room where we are anywhere we're distance. Like that's not, again, whatever the protocols are, that's great, but there needs to be an availability if you're having practice, and that's just
I understand what you're saying, and I don't, it's not that I disagree with you. I just for my own, because I know that they weren't going to jump through all the hoops if they were going to do it, and then we're going to be in a situation that's a little uncomfortable, and so I hope that we're going to get through this situation pretty quickly. But again, I think the problem is that you still have 8 players who didn't just get it. And I'll even point out, Terrence Davis had COVID in September.
Mm-hmm.
And so now here we are, just a couple of months later, and he's got it again. Well, we assume he's got it. I mean, he's in COVID protocols. So something's going on, while he's in health and safety protocols. So I'm going to assume that, yes, he does. But that's kind of where we're at. Like the new variants and all that, like everything is changing on a daily basis. And I don't think anything is 100% fail proof. But Sean, these players that are coming in, like I think we're tough on Justin Robinson just because it wasn't very good. Like what we were
No,
seeing was not very good at all. Um, we got to see Emmanuel Mudiay, which we do have like this incredible Emmanuel Mudiay uh, story that like that Sean and I were around when the Kings didn't draft Emmanuel Mudiay, and actually Vlade Divac decided to ask us after they drafted Willie Cauley-Stein, what do you think? He came out, he goes, he did his thing where cameras go off. He goes, well, guys, what do you think? Are you muted?
I muted because I had to sneeze.
You had to sneeze. And Sean just pops off at Vlade, like, come on now, Vlade.
He goes, how'd I do? And I just kind of shook my head and I said, not well.
No bueno, dude.
And it wasn't just me. Jason was in there too. And I'll never forget because Aileen kind of threw me under the bus. She goes, well, Sean thinks. And I said, yeah, man. I was like, and again, this was at a time where we needed a point guard. Like, and trust me, I'm all for best player available. But that wasn't Willie Cauley-Stein. And I was high on Mudiay, not so much because of Mudiay as a player per se, but a 6'5" point guard. When you need a point guard and you have Rajon Rondo, who might be able to develop a point guard, I said, you don't need another big. I was big on Justice Winslow. I was like, get Justice Winslow. You know,
yeah,
I said, if you want to,
they needed one then.
I said, if you wanted a big, get Miles Turner. I said he's got the most upside of any of these guys. I said, you already know what Willie Cauley-Stein is, and you don't need him. And it was at a time where
it was a George Karl era. That was it was Vlade's first draft. So basically the way that worked was George got hired for the last I don't know, what was it? Michael Malone coached to 11 and 13, so that's 24. Mm-hmm. And then 7 and 11, I think. No, it was much worse than that. 11 and
for
20.
Ty Corbin, it was worse. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
I don't have it in front of me, but
so we get to the end of the season, like 30 games of George Karl. I know for a fact that George Karl and his staff were all over Willie Cauley-Stein because they wanted a rim runner, and George also wanted to trade DeMarcus Cousins.
Right.
But he wanted a rim runner, and that's what Willie was.
And again, like you drafted Willie at a time when, again, you didn't really need him because you had the all-star center and you had someone like Costa Koufos in there, and you had all these different. Yeah, I think they still had Costa at that time. It just got him in that first year. But at any rate, a lot of these years are meshing together. But the point is Vlade came in, and the 3 of the first 4 draft picks he had were 6'10", 6'11", or taller. And it's like, you had DeMarcus Cousins like in his prime. So what are you doing? It didn't make a lot of sense. I was like, if that's what you're looking at, then trade the pick. Like, there's so many things you could do. If you don't like, if you don't like Mudiay, fantastic. Don't like Mudiay. Like, but again, there were other guards around there. Trade the pick. Like, get some flexibility. You don't have to draft Willie Cauley-Stein. There was no upside there. He did, to his credit, like, he did get better. Like, he got better. He developed a little bit more of a shot. But then, as you pointed out, James, in a previous podcast, the minute he sliced open his finger on the rim in Mexico City, he wasn't doing that again. Yeah. he wasn't going for boards, which he was never really a good rebounder anyway, but he was never really going to go for boards. He was never really going to try to block shots like that again. He could always make those instinctive plays, but the ones he had to think about, he'd be like, nah, I'll make a business decision. And, I don't blame Vlade. It was his balls on the line, so to speak. So I'll let him speak for himself. But yeah, I told him, I was like, and Jason Jones agreed with me. He's like, yeah, you've needed a point guard for how many years? And we kind of thought you might go point guard in this draft. So,
and what was his reasoning?
I can't exactly. I think he thought that he just thought Willie was the best player available. He thought that he wanted that. I remember him telling me at one point he thought he was the best player available, and he thought that the guy could be an all world defender. And
but he also said that he didn't want to work out for me, so I don't want to.
Oh yeah. I forgot that part. Yes.
Yeah, that's a big issue. That Mudiay didn't want to come in and work out for the Kings, and so Vlade didn't want to draft him. And
right, and you just gave everybody your playbook.
Yeah, that's a really, really bad standard to set. But I'll also say, like, look.
And by the way, for people who don't know, Steph Curry never worked out for the Warriors. Never.
Yeah.
So how'd that
So
work out?
the way that whole situation worked out, it was between George's first little stint and then the one season where he was the head coach the whole time. During that offseason, he did try to trade DeMarcus Cousins, and that's where we got the snake in the grass emoji. Then we fast forward, they trade Jason Thompson, Carl Landry, and Nick Stauskas, and a future first round pick for air to the Philadelphia 76ers.
For handlebars. You know what, that there's an expression for that in the mortgage industry. When you have a prepayment penalty or something like that for somebody who pays off their loan or refinances or whatever, you put that's called putting them with handlebars. You put handlebars on it because then all of a sudden you're not as flexible as you once were, and there are ramifications that come with it. And that's all you did. You put handlebars on your organization for their draft picks for the next 4 whatever years. Now, granted, as you're about to point out, it did sort of work out in their favor. Things kind of worked out, but again, it wasn't the most manageable of situations in the years that they did it.
No, I wasn't going there because I mean, we've gone through that. My point was that once they made that trade and dumped all that salary, that's when they signed Rondo, Costa Koufis, and Marco Bellinelli in the same offseason. And so they drafted Willie and then went and got Costa, who was George's center on the Nuggets roster. So if you didn't see that they were trying to trade DeMarcus Cousins, I don't. And then didn't they come back the next year and draft Yorgos Papagiannis?
They did.
The Papa G. Yeah, they did. So some confusion about the direction that the NBA was heading and how many centers you play per night seemed to be one of the issues at play. But also that Moutier decided to give Vlade I'll say Moutier and his agent decided to give Vlade the bird and not come in and play. And didn't Moutier, isn't he the one that instead of playing here, he went to China and played?
Yeah, he played overseas for years, for a year. And the other part of that too is they had Nancy Lieberman on the staff, and Nancy Lieberman knew Moutier since he was like 12 years old out of the Dallas area. Of course she did, right? Yeah,
she actually birthed Emmanuel Moutier. Her and Dr. John Hopkins.
Yes. If you haven't been paying attention, Nancy Lieberman over the course of this podcast, we've revealed how she knows everybody and name drops everybody, and but it's true. It might be a little embellished at times, but there are things that are absolutely true, and that one was a crazy truth. Like, she knew that one, and she had actually worked him out several times in Dallas, and that also became true. I was kind of blown away by that. So just the 6 degrees of Emmanuel Moutier, and here he is. I mean, a guy who never really could shoot but gets points in the paint, 6'5", has great vision. And it was kind of fun sitting next to you at last night's game because he hadn't been playing this year. Had a decent stretch in Utah. I thought he had a pretty good stretch with the Knicks as well. And you can see how upright he is with the dribble, doesn't keep his head down like a Beno Udrih kind of head down dribble. And he's got some really good vision. And I thought he had there were a point where I looked at you, I said, this kid should have 5 assists. He's only 25 years old.
They just kept bricking wide open shots.
They missed everything. Now, granted, he's not a good shooter, so he missed as well. He gets a lot of times his points in the paint, layup, what have you. But all his passes were beautiful, and he played some pretty nice defense. The thing I was waiting for was like, okay, where is he in the second half? And they didn't go to him, and they put so much of a workload on Tyrese. Like, I was waiting. I was like, okay, I mean, you're gonna have Tyrese play 43 minutes. Okay, that's fine, I guess. But there was a lot of pressure on Tyrese last night. He was not good. I mean, yes, he ended up with a career high assist, and yes, he had 22 points, but his turnovers, his decision, I mean, you heard him after the game. He was very critical of himself. And I thought Doug didn't do him much favors by keeping Moutier or another ball handler on the bench. I mean, it would have been nice to just spell him for a few plays, let him go off ball, just to kind of collect himself and not have to be so inundated with having to make every right decision at all times. through every play of the game. And I thought they put a lot of pressure on Tyrese. And, Tyrese is going to welcome it, but I think they could have saved him from himself a little bit last night.
Okay, so I think what we saw as soon as Moutier stepped on the floor, it was like, holy cow, they have another shot creator. It was like this horrible epiphany moment once again that this team doesn't have enough shot creators. And then the fact that he didn't play in the second half, I mean, I'm confused by that as well. I would have liked to have seen him and Tyrese together.
Yeah.
Even if you were going to have Tyrese on the court for the entire second half, let him play off the ball for 5 possessions, 10 possessions, let him catch his breath and let him be an off-ball shooter, which he's really, really good at.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a bit of a snafu with, I think Doug was just trying to hold it together. He also looked at the fact that they had 3 days off and like, look, I'm going to run some of these guys into the ground and just see if we can hang. The other thing is the Clippers did something that was very strange. They were picking the Kings up like a good 7 feet before the 3-point line. They were running their big man all the way out above. They set the nail at above the 3-point line, which I thought was absolutely crazy. And
it was brilliant.
It was, but like that's something that Tyree should have been able to pick apart, and that's why he had 13 assists. But
yeah, and what we've heard so often is how Tyronn Lue is so brilliant in his in adjusting gameplay and making in-game adjustments.
Yep.
That was a brilliant move because you recognized immediately that they're putting a lot on Tyrese, and Tyrese is the most frail guy out there, no offense. And you're gonna rough him up, you're gonna try and physical, you're gonna try and take him away, especially at a time where Buddy just can't hit anything. And man, we've talked about how Doug has gone with longer lineups, trying to find defense. I think they tried to get physical, and I think they were trying to rough up Tyrese quite a bit. And I think it was pretty effective, to be honest.
Yeah. So we're going to there's a couple of things that Sean just brought up that I want to get to, like very distinctly, when it comes to Doug and the job he's done over the last 5 games, when it comes to the Buddy situation yet again. But Sean, let's just close the book on Moutier. And I'll ask you this because I think I have a pretty strong opinion on this. I think with what did he play? 3, 4, or 5 minutes? I think in that stretch,
7, I believe. Yeah.
Was it that much?
I think it was 7. I have it right in front of me. I was looking at it a minute ago. Oh,
yeah.
I lied. I closed my window, but I do have it here. Moutier played 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 2 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought he should have played more. I thought he should have played in the second half. And I'll even go this far. The Kings have a lack of playmaking overall. I honestly believe they should waive Robert Woodard and just pick Emmanuel Moutier for the rest of the season. And I know this too, we just saw that Daniel House just signed a 10-day contract with the Houston Rockets. I would have picked up
with the Knicks.
I mean, no, with the Knicks. Yeah. He was with the Houston Rockets. They waived him so he could go somewhere else. He went to the Knicks on a 10-day, but the Kings were involved in that and were trying to get him. He's a former Monty McNair player. And these 10-day hardship contracts, you don't have to keep a guy for 10 days. You got to pay him for 10 days, but you can waive a guy and pick another guy up if one guy doesn't work out or if one guy slips into protocol or whatever. Those things are they're almost like tear up contracts at this point. And Emmanuel Moutier, we looked it up. What was he going to make? Something crazy, $138,000. I think it was $138,963 or something like that for 10 days.
Good work if you can get it.
Yeah. I'm in.
Yeah, I'm available.
Yeah. Sign me up. Yeah, I'll go set a screen. I'll go sit on the end of the bench and yell and scream. Yeah. So I think that the Kings could do some other things here. I think that if House becomes available again, we could see the Kings chase him again. 6'6", small forward, built like a Mack truck, can shoot the 3-ball, 3-and-D guy that played in Houston while Monty McNair was there. So just my opinion, though, I like what I saw from Emmanuel Moutier, and he's young enough. And I would say, why not? You do not have enough depth right now to get through this situation, and we're going to see more of these things, in my opinion. So I would.
Well, and we've talked about that, like a playmaker with size where especially when you're going with some of these, especially when you're going with some of these 3-guard lineups that we've seen, like having him at a wing position to be able to distribute the ball would be pretty nice right off the bench. So
yeah,
certainly capable.
He's like Drew Holiday size. I mean, he's a good sized dude. I mean, he's built like that. He's big. He's thick. As far as Moutier, and it reminds me a little bit of like Tyreek Evans light.
Yeah,
You know, that's what he kind of like on the court, how he kind of plays, and I think he's a little bit more engaged on the defensive end. So that would be what would you consider that, Sean?
I would. I think you could probably even do better depending upon how things fall out. But I think now that everyone's grabbing so many people from the G League and free agents, I'd kind of be like you mentioned, James. I think this is a good point because of the hardship. You can tear them up. You can see who falls out. Maybe there's guys that become available along the way. I know a guy I was looking at one point before the Bulls picked him up under the 10-day was Stanley Johnson. Not that he's so much of a playmaker, but the guy is a very, 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 very talented player who just for whatever reason hasn't made it work. And I thought this could be a nice opportunity for him. So that he's a guy I've kind of looked at, especially for getting another, small forward. I think he could maybe fit that bill. But but maybe Moutier would be a better fit. I think Daniel House is something you got to watch and see if that comes available. I think that's the part I want to find out. And you might know this better than I do, James, when it comes to House is like, what's the contract? What's the money like for him in particular? Because like, isn't it a little bit different than most players? I mean, you have the 10-day thing, but what if you signed him for the rest of the season?
Part of his contract it is picked up. Like there's a portion that the new team pays for. But also he as long as he doesn't sign a multi-year deal, then he doesn't just get all the money. Like because he's waived, there's an offset. I think it's like 50%. So if you sign him to a $2 million deal and he's already making like 4.5 with the Rockets, then I think there's like $1 million offset. So the Rockets get some of the money back and the Knicks don't have to pay as much money and he doesn't get all of the money. So it's a little bit different.
Well,
but
it sounds like it's tough for Sacramento in that regard if they were interested.
Well, yeah, but
like beyond a 10-day.
Yeah, if you don't, so the Kings could not have picked him up on waivers because the Kings don't have the salary cap space to actually pick somebody up. And someone said something today. Oh, this is just Vivek being cheap on Twitter, and I responded, hey, look, the Kings have $130 million payroll. It's the highest payroll the Kings have ever had in their history. And the NBA salary cap is, I think, 112 million this year. So he's like 18 million over the cap. The Kings are paying. The fact that they're paying for a roster that may or may not make the playoffs is a whole nother discussion. But specifically, Vivek isn't cheap. Vivek helped build the entire arena out. He built the giant hotel, the whole Doko area. A lot of that money came directly from Vivek's pockets.
Well, and think about even just from the basketball standpoint, like he's paid head coaches that aren't here. I mean, there's a lot of adjectives.
He pays a lot of those.
There's a lot of adjectives that you can slap on Vivek Ranadive. I mean, frugal and cheap is not one of them. I mean, this guy, look what the money he had to give to De'Aaron Fox. He did it. It's the biggest contract in Kings history. I mean, there are things that he's done. Plus, James, there's owners that during this pandemic and all the money that they've lost from a team standpoint, over 100 million in the first few months.
Yeah, the Kings have lost a couple of 100 million. I don't know what the exact total is, but yeah, it was 100 million in the first 3 months.
And when they did a cash call, there were owners that were like, I ain't got it. Well, guess what? Vivek covered it. So,
yeah,
it's not, I mean, to call the guy cheap, I mean, that's completely unfair, uneducated, and it's just flat out wrong. I mean, that's not the case. There's a lot of things you could call him, but that ain't it.
That ain't it. I did go to his Christmas party one time. He's not cheap. But it's just flat out.
I got an invite one time, and I wanted to go, and I was just like, no, I'm not gonna go. I show up in my sneakers and hat and hoodie, and they're just like, "Oh, you didn't get the memo."
It's kind of close to black tie. Yeah, I got to. I think the wife and I went down. We got to Davis, and we would already been stuck in traffic forever. we'd already been driving like a little over 2 hours, and I hit Waze to see how much further it was, and it was 2.5 hours more, and we almost turned around. I'm like, and then we had to drive home. We did not get a hotel room. That was a mistake. But there were like at least 100 people on staff. And then
Yeah.
MC Hammer showed up and started working the DJ booth.
Yeah, man, he lives right down the street. Lives in
Yeah.
the Livermore. So
And Ron Artest was there. Yeah, it was interesting. It was different, to say the least.
Did you meet Roger Craig?
Have you met my friend Roger Craig? So that's a joke around it that anytime that Vivek doesn't want to talk to you, which is most of the time, because Vivek is like, he's an introvert. He's not like, he doesn't, and he also doesn't want to speak to media quite a bit.
I do think that he is a little bit more open to that, but they don't want him to.
Yes. Okay. So Vivek will literally, like, if Roger Craig is with him, he will introduce you to Roger Craig, and then you turn back, and I swear Vivek has like the Acme hole from the cartoons where he throws out a hole in the ground and jumps through it, and boom, he's gone. You're like, this dude is magical. He's magical, Sean. Where did he go? He's like, have you met my friend Roger Craig? And he dissolves into
Run
space.
interference. Yep.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting. I'll say this: I was at the party, and Vivek was walking through, and he kind of had his head down, and he was like, you could see how stressed out he was, because this is at his house, and there's so many people there. And he glanced up for a sec as he's walking through, and he caught my eyes, and he put his head back down, and then he stopped and, hi, how are you? And he stopped for a second, and you could see that all of these people in his house, very few of them he knew.
Right. There's a lot of people who know my gate code now.
Yeah, and he certainly, I think it's a little bit because I'm a redhead and there aren't that many of us, but like there's an instant like, oh, I know you. And he stopped and he said hello, and he met my wife, and like, he took a breath for a sec, but you could just see him wearing the stress of all these people. Like, they're touching my stuff. They're everywhere. It's like, yeah, man, you invited them. It's okay. I don't know how we got on this subject, but
I don't either. It's
say
usually
yes
my
to
fault.
Moutier. I say yes to Moutier. Sean says yes to Moutier, maybe, or someone better. But I think at this point, like, why not? Like,
you need another playmaker.
Yeah, and so why not play Jemias Ramsey? And I said, well, because Moutier has 300 games of experience. Well, how is Jemias supposed to get that experience? Well, to be honest with you, he's not supposed to get it when you have 7 players out with COVID and you're trying to win games, not trying to lose every game. And you've already beat the Clippers twice. You got a chance to win the season series. It's right there in front of you. It's at home. You're hoping for the best, and you don't come away with it. But at the same time, Ramsey can get his time at the G League level until he's more ready. Moutier gave you a better chance to win, and that's all.
So. And he's not a playmaker. Jemias just isn't. He's a knockdown shooter. He can maybe play some defense.
Well,
I think and he hasn't. Yeah, he's missed every shot he's taken. It's crazy. I think if I had to look at this stretch of 2 and 3 basketball games, and maybe it's just because it's in my mind's eye, but there's probably only 2 people that have really stood out to me during this time that ordinarily. I mean, look, Damian Jones had probably the best game of anybody who's given an opportunity in that Spurs game.
And then he had one game. He had one game where he was really
slow. But I would even say that I think Tristan Thompson has made the most of his minutes every time he's on the court. He even hit a 3 and threw up 3 goggles last night. That was hilarious.
Didn't see I think coming.
No, I know. I definitely didn't see that coming. I thought maybe, and again, maybe it's just too recent, but those are the 2 that have really stood out to me during this time. And I thought, and I know we're not out of it yet, but I thought at this time a week ago, I was like, oh, maybe that might be a Jemias Ramsey. Maybe that might be somebody who is going to make the most of the opportunity. And like you mentioned, Chimezie has had some moments, but a lot of times,
moment towards like,
oh boy, like a minus 26. I'm not a plus minus guy. I'm not. But when you're a minus 26, like that's kind of a leap off the page.
He started the first quarter last night. He is 1 of 6 from the field in the first quarter, and I was thinking to myself, Number one, not one of those shots was a good shot. And number two, in what world is Chimezie Metu get 6 shots in a quarter and pacing for 24 shots in a game?
COVID, baby.
I guess. Okay, so what this leads us to, I think the most glaring, Sean.
We buried the lead.
The guy who should have stepped up, who got the opportunity to go back into the starting lineup and to be the guy that everyone thinks he is Buddy Hield.
Mm-hmm.
And we had one game where Buddy was so good. But Sean, that one game, it's enough to turn Doug Christie into Alvin Gentry and Luke Walton and Dave Yeager, every other coach in the last like 4 to 5 years of Sacramento Kings basketball. He fools you. He fools you. You think that you got something, and then you don't. And I don't think that there's a more frustrating player in the NBA at this point. Buddy Hield missed his first 9 shots. And so I looked it up because I'm like, how many times has this happened where this dude has shot them out of the gym in the first half? Buddy Hield on the season is shooting 34.8% from the field in the first half. He is shooting 31.25% from 3. He's taken 163s. And what are we, 30-something games into the season? 32 games in. So we're talking about a lot of threes per game. What is that? That's like 5 threes per game. That might actually work out. 5 threes per game, and he's not hitting. And he's even worse in the first quarter. And we were looking at other splits, and like De'Aaron Fox can't hit a 3 at all in the second half. It's like the most stunning. He's shooting 13% from 3 in the second half, but it's also on limited opportunities. He's like 46 threes. So that's not good. He's only hit like 6. But the fact that he's only shot 40-something threes, that's not a big deal. We're talking about 163, Sean. How many times has he shot them out of the game? And then
neon green light.
He's got a neon green light, and then he catches fire in the late third quarter and early fourth, and then boom, 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 boom. Missed every shot down the stretch and shot you. You got all the way down to like 3 points, shot you out of the game in the final 5 minutes of the game, and it was brutal to watch. And oh, by the way, was so bad defensively that I was like, there is no way to describe. I mean, how many times did Eric Bledsoe take him off the dribble? Like, we're not talking about superstar Eric Bledsoe that can jump out of the gym. We're talking about like worn out Eric Bledsoe that it should not be playing major minutes, but he was because Reggie Jackson was out. What would Reggie Jackson?
And he kept overplaying. Like, he overplayed the defense so that I'm going to make this steal attempt, but he's going to go right by you. And they kept telling him, no, buddy, just stay in front of him. Just, just keep him with you. Don't overplay. Don't reach. Yeah. Don't reach. Don't force him. Once you do that and he moves around you, like, then you're barbecue chicken. Like, if you can just stay here,
it's like too much. No.
Yeah. You're doing too. Well, don't do that.
That's not enough. No. You got to do more than that. Oh, no. That's too much. No, too much. Great too movie. Little. Too much. Yeah.
I love you, man. I'm forgetting Sarah Marshall is the.
Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Yeah, So it's so frustrating. All the Clippers did was like, they'd come up the court and like, hey, how are we going to switch on to Buddy? How are we going to get the ball into the guy that Buddy's defending? Or how am I going to get the ball to Paul George and make sure that Buddy's defending him? Or Eric Bledsoe or whoever. Man just kept leaving him. Like again and again and again. So my point is, like, Doug played him 43 minutes. I would have been fine with 22 minutes from Buddy Hield and anyone else playing. But I'll tell you, this stretch where the Kings started to come around was when Alvin Gentry cut him back to 19 to 20 to 22 minutes. That's when the Kings started winning again.
Well, and it also coincided with Alvin, I think, recognizing either Buddy's got it or he doesn't. And that coincided with a time where Buddy was really shooting terribly this season. Like, he started off really great in the beginning of the season, and then it got this murkiness where it was very inconsistent, and then it just went through like games, like a stretch of games where we're talking like a really bad stretch of games for Buddy Hield, where he's just not hitting, and it's just affecting everything. So what Alvin did was trim the minutes, And I thought that was great. And I thought we were going to see a little bit of that from Doug, but maybe when you're just without so many players, like he's just, this is the tough part. Cause I this is where I see, as you call it, kind of like the foolishness of these coaches who get, I don't know, poisoned or date raped
Mesmerized.
by
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like you're basically seeing Buddy Hield as this thing that maybe he's not. I understand. But when you're the Sacramento Kings, and James, you're reading off the statistics, even in those stretches of how he hasn't been, it's still like among their better from the perimeter. Like that just shows you how not good this team is. It's like, and even when this team is not good, it's like, well, he can get me back. I always say, if you're going to have Buddy Hield on your team, he can't be your second or third. He has to be what he is. It's just a catch and shoot guy, whether it's off the bench or starting. I don't really give a damn, but you just have to be able to let him do what he does, and then surround him with pieces that don't allow him to do what he does, which is the bad stuff. Right. They need him as a playmaker right now. They need him to make shots. They need him for all these things. And he's playing upwards of 40 minutes a game. I thought last night, you just can't keep riding with them. I mean, that first half, James, I got it written down here. It was 1 of 12, 1 of 10 from 3. Okay. And I think
started 0 of 9.
Yeah. Started 0 of 9
and 0 of 7 from 3.
And finished what, 5 of 22?
Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you got to recognize that the guy just doesn't have it. And again, it's still a good decoy, I guess. I mean, I look, they were still throwing stuff at him defensively, but maybe you don't play him in the third. I don't know what it is. Maybe you're like, all right, buddy, you don't have it. Let's sit you out. Maybe start you with the third, see how that goes. You miss a couple shots. All right, quick leash, pull you out, and we don't see you back until maybe the fourth. You can start the fourth, and if you can catch fire in the fourth, great. That's what we want. But man, it's like, it's the expression you've coined, to live by the buddy, die by the buddy. But you're like delusioned by it. You have to have in my opinion, you have to have Buddy Hield to have success on this team. Like with the roster it is, you have to have him shooting, but you have to recognize if he doesn't have it. And if he doesn't have it, you've got to make your adjustment. You can't just continue to just go out there. And last night was probably as bad as we've seen. Now, granted, they're depleted. They don't have a roster out there. But even last night, I was like, okay, we'll put Moutier in. Not that Moutier is going to hit you any shots. Maybe go to Jamias Ramsey in some stretches. He's capable of hitting shots. He just hasn't. And to hear Doug kind of double down on it last night, I thought was a little odd. He said, no, he was still the best shooter in the gym. He just missed shots. And I said, okay.
You know what, Sean? I have one of my mom's cousins, her husband, who just passed away, I think last year. He was older. He would carve wooden ducks, and they were like masterpieces, right? So he would like literally by hand, he would carve like full-fledged decoy ducks and then hand paint them. And they I think he sold them. I think they were like $250 a piece in the early 90s. They're like pieces of art, right? You know what? None of those ever did. They never got up and flew away. A decoy is a decoy. And I keep hearing this term decoy when it comes to Buddy Hield. A decoy doesn't shoot the ball 22 times and hit 5 shots. That's no longer a decoy. It's an inefficient player who is literally costing you the game. And so while I get it that the thought of Buddy Hield is enticing, like at some point he does have to actually do the job. And the other thing, Sean, I'll point out too, there's another hidden stat here. And it is that in games that are less than 5 points this season, Buddy Hield is 62 for 195 from the field. He's shooting 31.8% from the field in games that are less than 5 points. Either way, up, down, whatever it is. That's crazy, right? He's shooting 29.7% from 3 in those games. In games that are greater than 10 points or more, he shoots 44.2% from 3 and 43.7% from the field. He's perfectly fine when there is no pressure and you're literally getting your ass kicked. And most of the time, the problem is that you're getting your ass kicked because he just did the 29.7% in the first half and he shot you out of the game. And so,
yeah, but I would also argue, I mean, if you looked at the numbers of the other players, they're going to be down too. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to, it's going to, and again, I know it's different because that's Buddy Hield. He's supposed to be this much better shooter, but that's just, to me, it's more of a flaw in the way the Kings are built as opposed to really hammering down on Buddy. Like Buddy's the one guy that you know what you're going to get night in, night out. If the shot's there, and it's great and you want it. But if it's not, then his ills are a lot worse than, you know, what they are in games where they're hitting. It's just, how long are you going to ride it? And to me, I think Alvin has done a nice job of navigating that, and Doug hasn't. But I think the reason Doug hasn't is because they're a depleted team. It's like, what else? I think he looks at it as, what else is he going to do? I also don't like the visual. And again, this could be a lot of, I haven't been able to talk to Doug about this. But Doug spends a lot of his time away from the bench at midcourt watching everything. The one person that gets to come to talk to him is Jonah Hershew, and they have a discussion. Then they go into their coach's huddle, and then he comes to the bench in the timeout and talks to his players. There's not a lot of communication going on with the staff. I don't know why. I don't think it's a great visual. There could be more to it, but Doug spends all his time out at midcourt, and I just don't think that's a good look.
Okay, so that's a great segue because we're going to get into Doug Christie, the 2-3 coach of the Kings. And so I get what you're saying. I fully get what you're saying. I'm going to keep saying this, not to defend him, but to explain that when Luke Walton was fired, the Kings did not replace Alvin Gentry when he stepped into that role. So now you're down one assistant on the staff. Now they promoted why am I Rico Hines to the front of the bench, but that Rico Hines was already an assistant. They didn't do anything different, so they're down a body. That's my point.
And they were also down Jesse Murmis and Rex Kalamian.
But they replaced Jesse with Doug and Rex Kalamian with
Longobardi.
Mike Longobardi. So what I'm talking about in season now, you're down one coach because you fired Luke and you did not replace Alvin's spot when you moved Alvin up, right?
Everyone just kind of shuffled up. Yeah.
Everyone just slid over one, but you left a gap at the end. Now, Alvin Gentry goes out. Doug moves up. Now you're missing two assistants. Mike Longobardi goes out. The rotation tightens even further. Now you're down three assistants. So you're asking Doug Christie, who literally has been on at that point when he stepped into this role, what was it, 28 games as an assistant coach. And he hadn't been on an NBA bench since the 06-07 season. And even that was early in the season, I believe. He hasn't been on a bench basically since 2006. And now, not only did you give him the job temporarily, but he has no support staff at all. And there's no way to fix that. They could have rushed somebody in and brought in a coach and said, hey, help Doug out. But it goes to Jonah, right? And I don't even know. Jonah was Jonah back at the bench, or was he a front of the bench head assistant?
He was a front of the bench, but I think when he initially came with Luke to Sacramento, he began at the back of the bench.
Yeah. So your front of the bench guys were Doug, Alvin, Mike Longobardi, and Jonah. So are you allowed four? I thought it was only three. Either way, my point is that, like, Doug doesn't know where to stand because Doug doesn't have anyone telling him, hey, like, we need you over here for a sec to make sure that you're talking to these guys. And like, there's so little experience in the guy who's running the team, but also in the group that's supporting the guy who's running the team.
Right.
All of your experience is gone. Like, you have 35 years in Alvin Gentry. You got 8 years or 10 years in Luke Walton. You've got a ton in Mike Longobardi, like 12, 15 years, whatever it is. All of that's gone. And what's left are relatively inexperienced coaches, or guys who are usually development coaches or back of the bench coaches who are coming along. But, even guys like Stacey Ogman or Lindsey Harding, right? Yeah, all of those guys, like they just haven't had that front of the bench experience where they're actually writing the game plan. They might do some of the scouting, but they're not writing the game plan. And so, like, I think that's an issue. Like, I think we saw it specifically in against the Golden State Warriors when uh, they ran the box and one against Tyrese Halliburton, and Doug didn't have an answer. Um, and Ty also didn't have an answer, and you didn't have
No, we
enough
didn't.
guys. Yeah, you didn't have enough guys that were there that had an answer, right? I think at that point, maybe a guy like Harrison Barnes should step up, and Mo Harkless should step up and say, "Hey, this is what has worked for us in the past in a box and one. Why don't we try these things?" But that's kind of where we're at. We're at a point where you might need players who are more experienced than the coaches on the bench, because that's, again, it's where we're at. This team is decimated. So I'll also point out that Ty Lue is a very good X's and O's coach, right?
No, he's terrific.
Okay.
Especially with in-game adjustments and all that. I mean, he reads a game beautifully. He manages the game really, really well. And you can say what you will about the Clippers. He's kind of the right guy for the job. He's pretty sensational.
What about Steve Kerr? Is he good?
I think so, but I also think Steve relies a lot on the experience around him.
Okay.
I mean, you've got.
But how many? He's got 3 rings.
Right.
Yeah, and then what about Greg Popovich?
Oh yeah, no, I see what you're doing. No doubt. Yeah, like that was I pointed that out to Doug. I was like,
yeah,
I know how much you.
Your last
I know
3
how
games.
Much, yeah, I know how much you want to do this, and to get a game over Greg Popovich has to be. That has to feel fantastic for anybody trying to become a head coach, and you just want a game over Pop. Now, granted, the Spurs aren't what they are, and then you were competitive as hell against with the Warriors. Felt like a 2-possession game for the most of the game. No, I get it. I think
you ran out of gas. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, these are good moments for Doug. I get the whole I'm proud of my team every single time he comes in there. I get it, but at the same time, like there's going to be growing pains. Spade to spade, like there's still the loss is a loss, right? So 2-3. I do think it was look, I think the Kings would love to be 1 game under 500, right? Like, that to me is what you show as a goal for the season. If you can finish 500, you're a playoff team. So, especially in this West right now, I think 500 right now is a 6 seed, isn't it? 5 or 6?
Yeah, either 5 or 6. Yeah, it's not good. Yeah,
like Denver right now is a 500 team.
I'm going to say something to StatMuse people. That was. Did you see that tweet they had about since the Lakers signed Isaiah Thomas, they're 0-3?
I did not, but
yeah, I think Rudy Gay responded like, "That's some bullshit" or something. Like, why would you put that stat out there? I'll also say that the Lakers are, I think they're 15-15 since they didn't trade for Buddy Hield. I mean, that's LeBron James.
Yeah,
I mean,
there you go.
There's your stat. I mean, that's just as.
I mean,
good.
hey, the Lakers have not been good. They're an old team. I mean, you're trying to get by with LeBron, who's already on the downside of his career. I mean, LeBron's still phenomenal. I'm not trying to say. I mean, any team would still kill to have LeBron, but the Westbrook thing is weird.
I didn't mean to segue into the Lakers.
I know.
It's just a point. Like I hate that we see these stats that pop up, and maybe that's what people think I'm doing, like picking out stats with Buddy Hield. But the dude has 160 3-point attempts in the first half of games through the first 32 games. That's not a small sample. Where I mean, he's shooting 30% from the field. So yeah, Sean. I mean, like, I'm willing to give Doug a little bit more time, but I also know that it's very likely that Doug has coached his last game this season, that Alvin Gentry will be back on Sunday. We're not sure about that, but it's very possible. And if I look at the 5-game total and I look at the fact that he had no assistance and no help, and then I add in the fact that 6 of his players, you can even cut back to 5 of his quote unquote regulars are gone, including his numero uno and De'Aaron Fox, but also Marvin Bagley, who was playing very well. Terrence Davis, who was playing exceptional when he got sick. Like Alex Len was starting at center for a bunch of games because you had Rashawn Holmes out. Like, those players were meaningful to this team, and to not have them and to have an inexperienced coach with an inexperienced staff, just really, I think that you can't judge him as much to say like, look, you survived it and you didn't go 0-5, and because
Yeah.
everything could have been gone. Oh, everything was pointing towards 0-5.
And most people thought you would go 0-5. And I would say, if you're grading it, he's definitely a passable grade. I'd probably give him a B plus. I think that's probably pretty fair, being objective. I mean, we on a personal level rooting like hell for the guy. But then if you ask me, okay, did he show enough to be considered as a head coach in this league? Sure. Would I like to see Doug Christie in the mix for a head coaching gig by next year? No, I probably would not.
Yeah, I'll say this: like it's okay. Go ahead.
Why? Because I think you can and should do better.
Okay.
But I think no slide on Doug. I just think I honestly, and if Doug's part of that bench or somebody else's bench, great. I think you're lucky to have him. But again, when it comes down to head coaching, it's like, okay, he showed some things. It was nice, but I don't think he's there yet.
No, I don't. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think at the least, Doug needs to spend the next 50 games learning from Alvin Gentry every single moment. And I know that the guy, he takes notes. I think giving him a taste like this is going to it's going to be huge for his development as a coach. It's like giving a guy a handful of starts because you have a couple of injuries, and then he goes back to the bench and he sits there and thinks about, okay, what did I learn? And, Doug said it a couple of times. I haven't even had time to process any of this. I'm just trying to get us through. I'm just trying to survive. Well, I hope part of the process coming out of it is that, okay, I need to lean in to Alvin Gentry for the next 4 months and learn as much as possible. And if the opportunity comes up this summer, then maybe it's an opportunity that they give him. Maybe it's not. But if nothing else, I know that he will be better prepared after the next 50 games than he was after 28 games as an assistant. And so, I think that there's a lot of a good that can happen here. I think the way that the players followed him, the energy that they played with, all of those things you could see on the court. They got beat because they weren't a better team. The players that they had weren't better. And could there have been some coaching differences? Sure. Are there mistakes that were made? Yeah, there was a point where I think he forgot to put in a point guard for like a minute and a half. But again, he only has one point guard really on that bench. And so you're trying to manage and you're trying to survive while you're missing half your players, and you don't even have equipment managers to put names on the back of jerseys.
The tragedy too is I would have really liked to have seen what he would have done with De'Aaron. Would there be any mix? Would there be any change there? Because obviously we saw a longer lineup, and look, he's going to go with De'Aaron. I'm not saying he's not, but would we still not see a 3-guard rotation? Would we still see, more of a traditional point guard, 2-guard? I would have. There's a lot of things I would have liked to have seen what he would have done had he had De'Aaron Fox.
Well, he had him for one game, and Fox was phenomenal. And then, but then Doug sat him for most of the fourth quarter and brought him back the 2.5 minute mark. Again, those are things that he's just, there isn't someone there that's helping him put all of the pieces together, or there's not enough of them there. Like, hey, here's our rotation schedule. These guys have a rotation schedule. They're all working on it. Now there's one guy who's been working on the rotation schedule, and Jonah, who's with Doug. And, flying by the seat of your pants, man. I think at the end of the day, they survived. That's all we can ask for. And to go 2-3 over the stretch, hey, I don't know that anyone else could have done better. And I'm sure it could have been much, much worse. All right, Sean, it's time.
Oh,
the business of basketball.
So silly.
We've been talking about all kinds of craziness, but I think at some point this season, this last stretch has been so heavy because it's one of the more, really it's just bad. There's so much negativity because of the COVID outbreak, because of the difficulty of everything that's happening, guys flying in, all that stuff. So Sean and I are going to have some fun here. and we're going to talk about Christmas because Christmas is 2 days away. And to me, like I don't want to be non-inclusive here. Whatever holidays you celebrate, that's we're happy for you. We're not. This is Sean and I just happen to celebrate Christmas, so we're going to talk about Christmas, and we'll start with this, Sean. What are your 3 top Christmas movies?
Top 3. That's really hard to bring down to top 3. But I'm going to piss people off with one of them because I know a lot of people don't consider Die Hard a Christmas movie, but it is.
It is.
I love Die Hard. It's probably not my favorite, but I love Die Hard. I watch it every Christmas.
It's like top 5. It's top 5.
It has to be in there. Has to be in there. I'm a. This is where it gets weird because I love kind of the raunchy humor. If you guys know me, that's not really like a stretch. So I became a big fan of Office Christmas Party when it was released with Jason Bateman, Jennifer Aniston. I mean, it is a really funny movie. I think people would enjoy it. Not a traditional Christmas movie, but I do put those in there. I'm a big fan of Love Actually. I think that movie is fantastic. If you haven't seen it, I definitely have it in a Christmas movie. But the more traditional Christmas movie, I got to go Elf, man. Just seeing Will Ferrell get hit by a taxi and the way he is in that movie, and I'm a huge SNL fan. It kills me every single time. I will never see that movie and not laugh. So I think I gave you 4. I don't know the rankings, but those are kind of my 4.
Okay, so Elf. Have you watched the movies that made us on Elf?
I didn't. I have not seen. I know that they've made it, but I have not seen that. Oh wait, no, I did. Yeah, you're right. No, I didn't see that one yet.
It is absolutely phenomenal because Will Ferrell was doing Old School at the same time, but he had never starred in a major motion picture like as the star. He'd done like A Night at the Roxbury.
Had he done? I think he'd done Old School by then, right?
No, Old School and Elf came out at the same exact time. But even still, he's not the star of.
No.
I mean, he ends up taking over as the star in the movie because you're laughing so hard at Frank the Tank, but he's not the star. So, like, you should watch the movies that made us on it. It's absolutely spectacular because they had a bunch of issues with, like, they stole all the costume design and everything directly from, what is it? From Rudolph. The old.
No, you know what? I have seen this now. It's in the same collection as like Home Alone, which I know a lot of people put as their favorite Christmas movie. But because like Jon Favreau, didn't Jon Favreau do it?
Yeah, it's Jon Favreau's first directing. Oh no, he had done Swingers, what is
Well, he wrote. Did he direct Swingers? I know he wrote. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I think he did. Like him and Vince Vaughn had that little moment there. So. Yeah, so that's phenomenal. So I love Buddy. I love Elf. I love A Christmas Story. And then I think my third favorite, I like Christmas Vacation. I swear, every time you watch it, like even like the little stuff that happens in that movie is just absolutely spectacular.
It's brilliant. No, it's brilliant.
And it holds up so incredibly well. Like if you have in-laws, it's like as soon as the doorbell rings, it's like ding dong, and then ding dong. Like every single moment.
What's your favorite moment from that movie? Because I have one that's unbelievably. It's probably not everybody's favorite, but there's a moment in there which just kills me every single time.
Well, I'll say one of my
mine's not obvious. It's very subtle.
Yeah. So Cousin Eddie, like he cracks me up and he's just absolutely brilliant. Randy Quaid, right?
Right.
The scene where they're walking through the grocery store or through like a Target and he keeps stacking on bags of dog food, right, even though he has no money. And then he Clark says, what do you got for the kids for Christmas? He's like, we coasted into town on fumes and, and then Clark says, hey, we want to buy your Christmas for you. And then he gets to the end, he's like, well, Clark, and then he's got a whole list already. And Clark, I want you to get something nice for yourself. That's one of my favorite scenes. Yeah.
Unbelievable. My favorite one is when they're walking around the living room. It's Tim and Chevy Chase, and they're just like, he's basically catching him up on all the stuff that's gone wrong for him over the past few years. And he walks up to like this mobile that looks like it's going to spin, and he just flicks it and completely shatters it to hell. And like, he just looks at it and goes, takes a drink of the eggnog and keeps walking away. And then like Chevy Chase is trying to put the goddamn thing back together again, and he can't figure it out. It is brilliant. It is such a brilliant scene, but just the way he walks up to it, looks at it, and just flicks it, and it just shatters. And he just goes, just whatever. It absolutely slays me every single
Even
time.
like the super old lady, and it's like, excuse me, and she goes, oh, did I pass gas, Clark?
And the old man goes, did the room clear out? No.
Did the room clear out, Bethany? Yeah, like my wife and I, we laugh so hard every single time. And like he's literally dumping toxic fumes down. It's not the sewage. He's putting it down a storm drain.
Right.
The shitter's full.
Right.
Yeah, so that, I think it's so high on my list. It might be number one, but again, Elf is spectacular, absolutely spectacular. And we watch the Home Alone movies every year too, but only the first two. Anything after two is just shameful and shouldn't be on there at all. It's just, I can't believe that they've done that and created these alternative Home Alones. So and then, okay, so that's our movies. Like my top three is probably Elf, and then Christmas Vacation, and then Christmas Story. And my dad's name is Ralph, so it's like Ralphie.
Oh, Ralphie,
yeah. And my son has like the pink bunny outfit. My oldest, like he has an adult size, the big pink bunny outfit that Ralphie's aunt sent.
He looks like a pink nightmare.
That's right. He looks like a butt kisses. Okay, and then Sean, what's the greatest Christmas gift you ever got? I'm gonna say as a child, because
as a child,
yeah, like you can't say something you got for yourself. And like I don't know, I've got some amazing gifts from my wife over the years, but like as a young person, what was your favorite gift?
Yeah, man, I can tell you that it had, not for y'all to feel sorry for me, but we weren't known for getting great gifts at Christmas time. But I will say probably the PlayStation 2. Like when I ended up getting PlayStation 2, I got it, or maybe it was, it's probably I actually bought the PlayStation 2 myself. So I think it was the PlayStation, the first PlayStation we got it like 2 years after everyone else had it. So, but yeah, that was probably the best. I remember I'm old enough to where James, well, I know you're older than me, which makes me feel good. But I remember we were living in an apartment, and I did get the NES system with Super Mario Brothers. Now I'm 4 years old, but I still remember this. And I remember they got it that year, and my mother's husband and my uncle ended up playing it the entire. I got to watch. I could never really play it for the first however long, but yeah, it was they stayed up all night trying to beat that damn thing, and I was right there with them, so it was kind of fun. So yeah, it probably came back to video games, but yeah, we didn't get a lot of great gifts, but those are probably the two that probably stick out the most.
I got an Atari 2600, so I'll even date myself more than Sean. And that was cool, but a couple of years later, my friends had started doing Commodore 64s. So me and my brother had like in the back of like a magazine, you could pick out like packages, and we had told our parents that we wanted a Commodore 64, but it was expensive, and we weren't rich kids at all. Like my dad is a construction worker, so we got to Christmas and there were two big giant boxes under the tree. And so we thought, well, maybe we got him. Well, one was for me and one was for my brother. My brother's only 15 months older than me. So we opened them and it was sleeping bags, and we were so bummed out.
So
and we're
pissed.
like, oh, sleeping bags. But you can't be that way. So we, played it off.
Sure you can.
Like,
If it's
amazing.
socks and underwear, throw a tantrum.
So right at the last second, my mom said, "Oh, I think we've got one more thing," and they wheeled out. I mean, it ended up being like 4 boxes because it came with like not even a daisy pinwheel. It was the next one after the day, but the laser printer, where if you accidentally brush the paper with your fingernail, it scratched the paper, and it didn't have lines, so you had to tear it. Came in a spool, and you had to tear the paper up. So if you did like a report for school, it would take like an hour to print, but then after that you had to tear it off very carefully and hope that you didn't like chingus the bottom of your piece of paper. And so anyway, yeah, that was probably the best at Commodore 64. And because you got to play video games nonstop, and then have those the big giant floppy disks that
those are something.
4th and inches. That's what we played all the time. 4th and inches and hardball. Yeah. So
wow. Yeah, you're not that much older than me, and I have no idea what those are. So
well, I mean, Tecmo Super Bowl, right?
I remember that.
Tecmo Bowl. Yeah, that's like one of the greatest games ever. Yeah, 4th and inches and hardball. Actually, hardball, if you've ever watched Princess Bride, which I know that you have, that's what he's playing when his grandpa comes in the room. He's playing hardball on the television. So it was a baseball game that was fun. You could create 4th and inches. You could create your own players. That's what it was the first time, but your players still look the same. It didn't matter if you made him like 7 feet tall. No, he was still this big.
Still the same.
Yeah, still the same on the screen. So yeah. Anyway, Sean, do you have any final thoughts?
I do. The blowing in the cartridge of a Nintendo 85 or NES, I don't think it ever worked, but everyone did it, and then it worked. Like, people say that it never worked. I think it worked. I think there was something to that.
Yeah, and my best friend got a Sega Genesis,
those
the
are
first
great.
time. Yeah,
Love
with
Genesis.
the flight simulator one, which is what was big. That was always nuts, and we didn't have that. I didn't even get a Nintendo. I never had a Nintendo, what was it? The Nintendo 64, like the big gray box with the flip up.
Oh yeah, the only reason you needed 64 was because of GoldenEye. That game was great.
Or Contra. I love playing Contra. I had a friend who had one, and we would play up, down, down, left, right, BA.
Oh, you mean the regular NES? I was thinking of the N64. Did N64 have Contra? I don't know.
No. I think it did, but I meant the original Nintendo.
The original Contra was dope. I like that.
Yeah, it was awesome. So, all right. Well, happy holidays, everyone. Whatever you celebrate, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it with family. If you don't celebrate it, that's fine. Just look out the window and look at your neighbors celebrating it, and have some joy for their celebration. I'm making prime rib for Christmas Day. You doing anything special?
I am. I'm going to safely meet with some family. I don't know what they're making. I know I'm no part of it, so that means Sean gets to clean up, which I'm always happy to do, because I get kicked out of the kitchen, so I want to help out in some way. So I'll definitely clean up. But yeah, I don't know I know they had prime rib for Thanksgiving, which, don't get me started. I think we talked about that. When you don't have turkey on Thanksgiving, that's just a travesty. So yeah, I don't know what they're making, but I'm looking forward to it for sure. And hopefully it's a nice little precursor to get ready for the week ahead. Because 4 home games in 6 nights?
Oh, great! During a global pandemic, 4 games in 6 nights. We don't even have
the turn of the new year.
That's right. And then we even have a New Year's Eve game. And Luca's in health and safety protocols, which, maybe they moved up everything and Luca will be back, but there's also a possibility that the Kings play, I think, Dallas twice, right? In the span of a couple of days.
It's Dallas like back to back.
Yeah. So we have no idea if Luca will be there or not. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Thanks for sticking with us. We hope that you're enjoying what we're doing. We're having a good time, whether you are or not, messing with each other.
Selfishly, we're having fun.
Yeah, we're having a good time. Be safe out there. Make sure to subscribe to the Kings Beat. Do a paid subscription if you can. Give it to yourself for Christmas.
There you go.
There it is. There's your Christmas gift. The happy hour is coming, January 6th.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and we're excited about that. I think we're gonna add a guest. We're gonna add it. That's I'll figure out something and we'll add somebody to the docket with us. But we're having a good time with this, and we hope you are too. So for Sean Cunningham, I am James Ham. Merry Christmas from the Kings Beat. We'll see you next week.